Well, Indonesia correspondent Anne Barker joins me now from Jakarta. Now, Anne, can you tell us a bit more about what the final report revealed?
Yvonne, there's an absolute litany of errors and mishaps that are outlined in this report. We haven't even seen the full report yet. It apparently runs to about 400 pages, but a very long summary was effectively released to the media today in Jakarta. And it sheets home the blame not just to Boeing, the manufacturer of the plane, not just the airlines and not just the pilots, but all three and a lot of the ground staff as well. For example, with Boeing, it points to the anti-stall system known as MCAS or MCAS, saying that it was set up to send the nose of the plane immediately down when it received data from one sensor that was faulty. There was no backup to that sensor. It relied on one sensor that automatically made the system vulnerable to error. And in fact, the two sensors, one on each side of the plane, were out of sync because one of the sensors, which had been repaired only a short time earlier, was 21 degrees away from alignment. And that was effectively what caused the major problem, or the initial problem, that the pilots then failed to deal with. But the report also says that Boeing had failed to put any instructions in its manuals to help pilots know what to do, that it wrongly assumes that pilots would know how to deal with a faulty anti-stall system, but in fact they didn't. It said that, for example, during the flight, the control column was in such disarray that it required 103 pounds of strength, that's 47 kilograms, to counter the issue, and ultimately the pilots failed to do that. Of the pilots, the report said that one of them was completely unfamiliar with the plane. He'd shown issues during training. They didn't have enough knowledge of how this anti-stall system worked. In fact, one of the pilots, the co-pilot, had only learnt that he was going to be piloting this plane at 4 a.m. in the morning. The flight left Jakarta soon after 6 a.m. The captain told him that he had the flu, and there were serious miscommunications heard during the actual flight from the voice recorder. The captain had failed to brief the pilot properly during the emergency when the plane was already starting to nosedive. Of Lion Air, it was equally damning. It said that the faulty sensor had been miscalibrated in Florida during repairs, and there was evidence that it had never been tested as Lion Air reinstalled that sensor on the plane the night before. 31 pages from Lion Air's maintenance log from October last year were missing. You can only wonder what was in those pages. And in fact, it says ultimately that Lion Air should have grounded the plane the night before when it realised there were problems, because there had been several similar mishaps and incidents on flights in the days before, particularly the flight from Bali to Jakarta the day before, where the pilots seemed to have to deal with a similar issue and only finally were able to override that anti-stall system and continue the flight to Jakarta.
A litany of errors indeed. What recommendations have been made to ensure there's never a repeat incident?
Well, look, a lot of the recommendations really relate to Boeing. For example, it calls for that anti-stall system to be completely overhauled. That's something that Boeing is already doing. They are building the system again. Clearly, it calls for extra backup with regards to those angle of flight sensors that fed the faulty data to the system, which then sent the nose into a dive. It calls for more manuals, better instructions, better training for pilots, and a better certification system. At the moment, it's Boeing itself that certifies new processes and systems like this. The report has called for better oversight from the US aviation authorities, and similar recommendations have been made to Indonesian aviation authorities and aviation authorities at the international level to ensure that these processes are not only put in place, but they are sort of scrutinised properly by the relevant authorities, and that there is less chance for error in future.
And Anne, can you share with us a little bit more about how family members of the Lion Air victims have responded to the report?
Well, the families of the 189 victims in Indonesia were given an advance showing of this report on Wednesday. They were overall very angry, obviously still distraught at the loss of loved ones. Some people lost more than one family member on that flight. They're very angry at the fact that, you know, the report doesn't necessarily apportion one person, blame to one person or one organisation. It doesn't recommend sanctions, for example, against Lion Air. That's something that they would like to see, although they do understand that Boeing also has been criticised. There's no one organisation at blame here. They also complain that the report is too technical. They can't understand exactly what it was that caused the crash. But as I said, it was a complex chain of events that really led to this crash. There are a lot of litigation cases still in place in the US. There's more than 150 people from both the Lion Air crash and the one in Ethiopia a few months later, which suffered similar problems. They are suing Boeing in the US. Some people have already been awarded payments of about $1.2 million US. So that's where a lot of these families see the possibility of some justice in the weeks and months ahead.
And thanks so much for updating us there.